Welcome, everybody. Good morning. You're from all across the world, so good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're coming from. My name is Ian Goldman. I'm president of the International Evaluation Academy. I'm a professor at the University of Cape Town. I'm a former head of evaluation in the South African government. So I'm going to be your moderator today, and it's great to welcome you to the seventh Future of Evaluation Dialogue, which, as you probably know, is part of a monthly series organized by the Eval for Action campaign. And this particular one is focused on the World Day of Social Justice, which is tomorrow on the 20th of February. And we're exploring the multifaceted role of evaluation as a transformative mechanism for addressing systemic inequalities and advancing global social justice. And we're going to continue to look at issues like the role of participatory and inclusive evaluation approaches and how they can help to shift power and amplify marginalized voices, how real-time and adaptive methods can better track equity outcomes in rapidly changing environments. And it also links to work that we have been doing as a global coalition, including the Academy, Eval for Action, Eval Partners, and others, to strengthen the contribution evaluation makes towards a safe, just, and regenerating planet. And just a few quick reminders as we go. If you're joining us via LinkedIn Live, you can continue the conversation there by posting your reflections and questions in the comments. But here on Zoom, would you all use the Q&A function to share any questions? And you may get some responses during the meeting directly. And if you'd prefer to follow in another language, you're very welcome to use the Zoom interpretation and translation features, which you should see at the bottom of your Zoom screen. So just a bit of introduction from me. And my work now is really absolutely focused on the polycrisis that we're facing. We're facing unprecedented effects of climate change. The rate of change is increasing. We're seeing ecosystems break down. They talk about the sixth extinction and the loss of our fellow inhabitants of the earth on which our survival depends. And this destruction is primarily caused by rich people. In fact, 15% of global carbon emissions come from the top 1% and 49% from the top 10%. We're seeing extreme inequality across nations and within nations, and that threatens social breakdown, particularly as we start to see increasing climate effects. Now, evaluation has an important role to play. In work led by the Academy, we looked at how evaluation could contribute to addressing the polycrisis. And what the field said is the evaluation is not effective in addressing or voicing the deepening polycrisis and the transformations required. What people wanted to see, the aspirational future, was that evaluation is addressing the polycrisis systemically and systematically. It's being used across organizational cycles. It's a core competency and valued by wider society. And in order to get that to happen, we, the people engaged with or inspired by evaluation, have to lead and take the power to change the evaluation field, to transform these systems for a just and generating planets. So that's the background for us to consider evaluation's role in promoting social justice. And today's question prepared for the experts is evaluation fulfilling its potential to advance global social justice? So now let's meet our panelists and hear about why is evaluation fulfilling its potential to advance global social justice and how they see it as critical from their perspectives. And let's start with Geeta Batra. And Geeta is the director of the Independent Evaluation Office of the Global Environment Facility, with over 25 years in international development and 15 in evaluation. She has led and managed over 100 evaluations. She has a PhD in economics and an MBA in finance, with experience spanning the World Bank, IFC, and American Express. Over to you, Geeta.
Thank you very much, Ian, and a pleasure to be here. Good day to everybody. Evaluation definitely helps advance positive global change under certain conditions. And our work at the Global Evaluation Office of the Global Environment Facility has clearly highlighted this. Evaluations can show who benefits from environmental projects and whether local and marginalized communities are included, which strengthens accountability and shared learning. When communities take part in the evaluation process, it's pretty clear that their experiences and knowledge clearly help shape how projects improve over time. Our lessons have also shown and stressed how looking beyond technical results to consider participation, inclusion, and how projects actually affect people's daily lives clearly impact project outcomes. In this way, I think evaluation actually helps contribute to better outcomes when it pays attention to who is involved, whose voices are heard, and what real changes happen on the ground. Thanks.
Thank you, Geeta. Next, a quick input from Andrea Lisa Belzer. So Andrea Lisa is a credentialed evaluator employed as a senior advisor with the Atlantic region of Indigenous Services Canada. She serves as past president of the Canadian Evaluation Society, treasurer of the International Organization for Cooperation in Evaluation, and she will be taking over as president of the International Evaluation Academy from me in July. And she's also on the Global Advisory Council for Blue Marble Evaluation. Andrea Lisa, over to you.
Thank you so much. So the question of whether evaluation is fulfilling its potential to advance global social justice is asking us, what will it take for us to be more effective? And referring to the Canadian Evaluation Society's renewed core values, that's about the influence that we have through our and our products towards the well-being of all persons, peoples, and all of nature. It also implies the quality of the content of what we produce, as well as the responsibility we take for the resources that contribute to our practice. And that includes our environmental footprint and also our cultural and relational responsibilities in the practice. So I just wanted to say that for me, the ways that we achieve social justice through our practice, it has to do not only with what we produce, but how we produce it and the relationship that we have with the resources that we use and the modes of power that we think about and how in the process we encourage awareness of more agency than perhaps was realized in pockets of disempowerment. Particularly with global local interaction, and in particular with the rights of Indigenous peoples. Thank you, Ian.
Thanks, Andrea Lisa. So next we have Baraka Mfilinge. So Baraka is a monitoring, evaluation, accountability, and learning professional from Tanzania. With over 8 years of experience. He currently works as a meal officer at the Untold Foundation and is vice chair and Africa representative of the Eval Youth Global Network. He's also the managing partner at Ufanisi Knowledge Hub, a consulting firm, and founder of the alumni network of MNE at the Open University of Tanzania, where he advances practical, youth-led, and justice-oriented evaluation across Africa. Baraka, over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Prof. Brian. I'm very glad to join you in this important conversation, especially as we celebrate the International Day of Social Justice. Yeah, it's true that evaluation has made progress in terms of accountability and learning, but again, it falls short in terms of advancing social justice. This is because the power remains within the institutions and they remains within the institutions and not the community. This is rarely where you can find, if you go, especially when you are working in the consulting industry like me, I remember like last year we were commissioned with one of the organizations who were doing online evaluation. We went in the community and while we were interviewing one of the farmer, asked us that I have been asked the same question yearly and yearly about yields, but nothing has been changed or nothing feedback has been brought back for us in the community. So this tells us that when community feels like the data providers, they don't see the meaning of evaluation itself. And therefore, for the evaluation to succeed, it must empower people. It must promote change instead that focusing on reporting and just focusing on just like being of the compliance tool. So this is how monitoring can create meaningful social change by strengthening institutions, by including communities in decision making, especially the youth and the marginalized community, to make sure that the social justice is really felt by the community and not the institution that they are working with. Thank you.
Thanks, Baraka. And last but not least, Rania Fazza. So Rania is a human rights activist who professionally is a seasoned evaluation and capacity development consultant. She's been working for over 20 years. She's worked in conflict and fragile context, has expertise in local development, women and youth, gender inclusiveness and gender-based violence, inclusive economy, human rights, political and civil participation, and conflict analysis. Over to you, Rania.
Thank you, Ian. Hi, everybody, and thanks for having me. So my colleagues already touched upon several important points. I'll speak out of my experience from the international development field. So while the evaluation has made some strides to acknowledge equity, specifically during the past 10 years, its impact on the global social justice remains either inconsistent or by far fragmented. We would see some beams of hope here and there, but it is not yet a transformative practice in itself on the evaluative industrial complex. I also work as a consultant, so I am on that kind of relation with supply and demand kind of relation. So from my point of view, or from what my experience tells me, evaluation should go merely beyond, and here I intersect a little bit with Baraka, beyond just consulting the marginalized, asking them, oh, how was it for you guys? Did you feel good? How were the yields? And so on. It's only successful if these unseen, unheard, and powerless people actually hold the pen with us and can actually contribute with us. It's not enough to include them as data point, but also to define with them the values. What is success to them? What the programs are impacting their lives, their livelihoods, their environment. This is what must drive the inquiry, basically. So does the evaluation reflect what matters to the community, or is it what measures what the donor or the implementer wants? So this is a very important niche for us. When we speak about social justice, specifically in the global international development arena, we think a lot of the anatomy of power. Mainly, do we challenge these assumptions of programs and donors, or we merely validate the implementation? Oh yeah, we've done 10 workshops here and included 70 people there, and hooray, we've done it. Beautiful, thank you. So questions should be dictated, or are now dictated by those who fund and manage the program. They are choosing what we measure. They are choosing even the criteria. We all apply these DAC criteria, as everybody knows. They are defining success, and they are even choosing which stakeholders we have to communicate with and with whom we need to interview. So this is by far the blind spot of the evaluations and the major challenge. Back to the environment. When we speak about social justice, this is inseparable from environmental justice. The flora and fauna or the ecosystem and the ecological commons that we live in sustain these very specific communities we work with. And evaluation, until now, is not achieving its potential because it ignores the distribution and exploitation of natural resources. It ignores digging into who access what, the use and quote unquote maybe the abuse of the natural capital, and how the resources are extracted. So until now, I see a longer way to go. Thank you.
Great, Rania. So I think there's quite a powerful message coming through from this. And the core message that comes for me is we need to change power. We need to change the system from power over the global south, power over workers, power over nature, to power with. And in fact, we've just written a chapter of a Jeff book on this. And we need to we need to understand from the people experiencing this changing world, their view on success. I really liked your phrasing of that, Rania, and lived experience. And rather than a view just from a central government or from an international donor of what their view of success is, the lived experience is really critical. So thanks very much. That was a really great start. So now we're going to change the energy. We're going to share a short live poll built around a provocative statement, something which is designed to challenge our assumptions and stretch our thinking as we explore how important it is that evaluation plays a role in addressing social justice. So the provocative statement is: if evaluation remains a technocratic exercise that that leaves power, equity, and lived experience untouched, it risks legitimizing the very inequalities it aims to fix. So you see the poll, you've got three options: agree, disagree, or have a nuanced view. Another point I think that came through quite strongly is we're waiting for these results to come in, and we're getting they're coming in pretty quickly. That's great. The LinkedIn audience, I hope you can sort of comment on it, even if you can't necessarily do the poll directly, but you can certainly be giving your comments. I think one of the important things which Baraka talked about was this distinction between an institutional view and the view of the people themselves. This difference between the lived experience and the institutional view. And I think one of the things, for example, in South Africa that we're exploring, we've just revised our national evaluation policy framework to try and embed in that changing the power dynamics. One of the challenges, how are we going to do that? And that's a practical exercise that the Academy is working with South Africa actually on. And what does that practically mean? How do we get, steering committees? How do we change the power balance in steering committees? How do we change the power balance in the way the system works? So these are some of the practical issues we're going to have to find. It's all very well talking about power, but how do we change the practical systems which actually embed power? Good. We've got nearly 60% of participants have voted now. Looking forward to some more. But most of you seem to really agree with the statement that's coming. Yeah. So looking forward to this. Come on then, a few more to come in. They're still coming, still coming. Great. I think we could end the poll now, Erin, and let's move on. So you can see that the vast majority of the group is this being shared on the? Can everybody see the poll? Is this being shared on the screen? Yeah. So everybody sees that we're actually getting the vast majority agree. So we have to find ways to move from this technocratic exercise. We have to find ways to address power and lived experience. Otherwise, we are actually part of the problem, which is creating the polycrisis. And this is where I think the sort of the view that evaluation is neutral. If you're neutral, you're just supporting the status quo. So we have to have values which are valuing regeneration. Otherwise, we will continue to support the destruction that we're seeing at the moment. Right. So now I'd like to hear the views of the panelists on the provocative statement and how you saw, your reaction to how the audience responded. And this time I'm going to start with Baraka. Baraka, how did you see and what is your view on that provocative statement?
Yeah, thank you very much, Prof. Ann. For me, I partially agree with the statement. Evaluation tools themselves are not the problem. For me, the challenges arises when evaluation is disconnected from the people realities. When evaluation mainly serves reporting instead of transforming and producing technical just findings without even touching the reality in the community, then it becomes a challenge. So what is important here, evaluation should challenge inequality by shaping decision rather than just generating information. I think that is what is important for me. Thank you.
Great. Okay, so the tools are not the problem, it's the way we use it. Okay, so now Rania, over to you.
Yes. If I had the chance to answer the poll, I would answer nuanced. Because in my practice, evaluation fundamentally is a relation of supply and demand. And it is shaped and influenced largely by the values of who lead it or requested, maybe. This is why, from my perspective, evaluation exists on the broad spectrum. I have experiences where evaluation was very actively engaged and tried to advance social justice. And I have experiences in very structured technocratic evaluations that have even strict templates of reporting. So the spectrum is wide. Definitely the weight is more towards the technocratic, but there are certain international organizations, certain program managers, even certain people among certain governmental agencies who are aware that things must change. So again, there is a beam of hope. We are not yet there. So if we treat evaluation as a purely technocratic exercise, we reduce it to the form of a human machine learning. And I want to invite AI into our discussion because I have been into some webinars where people were saying, oh, will AI replace us evaluators? Well, if we are only human machines, then yes, AI will just remove Ian and Rani and Baraka and Gita and Angelisa and becomes the evaluator. However, when evaluation is stripped of its social context and it's reduced to a black box, we become algorithm. It's a process of data in, data out. You have paradigms, you have frameworks, you follow them, and you have an evaluation. This is not what evaluators do. This is a black box exercise. For us evaluators, evaluation must break free from the technocratic paradigms and these like gold standards and understand the approaches and the processes. And here I connect a little bit with Annalisa, who said we have to think of the process of how we are producing the knowledge and the evidence differently. And this means valuing indigenous knowledge, valuing oral histories, lived experience. So these are also rigorous evidence, and rigorous evidence isn't only the gold standard. So data is not neutral, as algorithm isn't. And so it is just the underlying systems that we are working with is what we need actually to challenge And from an evaluator point of view, we need to challenge ourselves. We need to put our biases into check. We need to question our motives, our questions, and our values. One last little element is the use of language. When we say marginalized, beneficiaries, stakeholders, we are stripping these communities and people from their agency. Language actually matters. If I only do focus group discussions because this is what I learned in my master's of evaluation, then this doesn't understand and respect that data can be communicated through different ways if I'm working in areas in Pakistan or in Africa or in the Middle East. Thank you.
Thanks, Rania. I like that expression, if we're just human machines, then AI will replace us. Andrea Lisa, over to you.
Thank you. Something that I'd like to add to the consideration of evaluators and evaluation practice being responsible for having change at the level of the evaluand is the contribution of evaluation to the thinking of the commissioner and the thinking of the funder and the accountability of the commissioner and the funder to themselves, as well as to clients and society. And that gets to the point of how was that political or financial wherewithal, that so-called power, how is that derived? And how is that being redistributed? And so not only learning about how, whenever we say they, how they can do better, how we can do better, how are we drawing the circles of accountability? The other thing that I'd like to put in terms of thinking about technocratic practice is I'd like to suggest that even if we think of the physical body, I was in a conversation with Ian Goldman yesterday about how we behave as agents of transformational change and how we do that in a way that is organic and so on. And I said, well, even our heart has a very strict rhythm. So there are parts of our autonomous functioning that are very, very technocratic, so to speak, and then others that are free and creative and so on. And so if the technocratic aspects of commissioning and so on are taking responsibility for themselves, seeing themselves, their own origin stories, and decolonizing themselves, then that can be useful. So in terms of single, double, and triple loop learning, are we doing things right? There's a time and a place for that. The problem is that there's so much effort going into that, sometimes at the expense of the other investments. So I'd like to actually pose at the opposite side of being a technocrat, being a spiritual warrior. And so I have with me a book called Sacred Instructions from Sherry Mitchell, who's a rights holder here in Mi'kma'ki in Eastern Canada, where I live. And she's talking about spiritual warriors as being teachers and creating the spaces for learning and relational accountability, and for taking care of the elderly and the most fragile and vulnerable members of community as a sacred responsibility. So that's sort of the opposite of a technocratic function. So how are we seeing ourselves as indivisible and mutually responsible, and then see that in the system and allowing space for both?
Yeah, thank you, Andrea Lisa. So I think some of the things emerging, we're going to have to change values. And we need those values changing in evaluators, sure, but we need the values changing in the commissioners, in the managers. If they do not have relationship to other species and the planet, that is going to come through in the way they manage their programs, and it's going to come through in the evaluations. And then we're in deep, the deep crisis we're in will continue. And those values are what distinguishes us from AI. And those values and the spiritual practice that Andrea Lisa mentions, which of course in much of the West is not taken very seriously, but in the global South where I live, this is something that's very much part of the lived experience of everybody in South Africa. It's a very deep It's a deep question for many people, for example, and of course in much of it, Africa and Asia. So I really liked also what you said, Andrelisa, about the process really matters and how we express the relationship to nature, to the communities affected, to the disempowered, or are we actually just relating to elites and power? And of course, many programs, that's what they're serving. And a big question for me is it addressing the deep systems driving dispossession and accumulation by a few and despoiling the planet? And if it's not, and that's where I really like this point about double loop and triple loop learning, because if we're not asking the triple loop questions, we're continuing to perpetuate the system which is failing in the first place. Great. So now we're coming to an opportunity to go a bit deeper. And we've got some specific questions for each of the panelists, and we're going to take forward some of the themes in more depth, and hopefully this will stimulate some thinking in the audience and in the LinkedIn group as well. So firstly, Andrelisa, you stay on stage. So to what extent do current evaluation practices challenge existing power structures, inequalities, and colonial legacies in global development and humanitarian action? Over to you.
Thank you. I'd like to just refer quickly back to Gita for a statement on the provocative proposition that we all just spoke to, because I think we missed you.
Sorry, Gita. How about that?
Well, much has been already said, but I actually wanted to bring in a response to one of the questions raised in the chat, which is, we're all doing objectives-based evaluation, and it's not the evaluator's role to bring in all these. I think there was a question on that, and there was also a reference to systems thinking. And yes, we're all, we all do objectives-based evaluation, but I think in a lot of our evaluations also at the JEF-IO, what we found is we are often giving comments about you're not taking country context into consideration when you're designing these programs. Sometimes you're doing cookie cutter stuff, taking from one country to the other. And I think this is where evaluators can actually step in and say, well, we're going to take country context, we're going to take local context. I mean, you can't do an evaluation of the Amazon without including indigenous peoples, right? And local communities. You can't do an evaluation of them without understanding cultural impacts and everyday realities. And these are things that, Ranya's mentioned, the other panelists have mentioned. You can't do it just taking into account indicators and outcomes. The other place evaluation actually fills in a gap, and I want to bring this in the context of systems thinking, as well as, the SDGs, since we're on a UN panel here, is about the trade-offs, right? The SDG layered cake, which showed the relationship between environment, socioeconomic, cultural attributes, etc. You've got to actually take into account the trade-offs between environmental goals and community livelihoods. This is often not done by project practitioners. This can be done well by evaluators. And I think without capturing all these perspectives, trade-offs, benefits, getting community voices in, I think evaluations can sometimes danger on the side of making projects appear more successful and ignoring how communities are actually experiencing the change effects. So that's where I think, even though we all do objectives-based evaluation, I think we can fill a lot of these gaps that projects miss and project-level evaluations miss. Thanks. Over.
So I think what you're raising is a very important point, Gita, and I think one of the challenges of much of development practice is it's focused on projects and programs. But actually, we need to change systems. And all too often, the projects are not designed in ways that leverage system change. And I agree with you, if the evaluators are informed through systems perspectives and we start to build much more systems literacy, we can be asking those important questions, which can, really question whether these projects are having those deeper issues that they should do. So come back to having missed Gita, apologies for that. Coming back to the question to Andrea Lisa, to what extent do current evaluation practices challenge existing power structures, inequalities, and colonial legacies in global development and humanitarian action?
Thank you. So I would just like to shift the focus on from evaluation practice happening by producers of evaluation. And thank you for bringing the United Nations system, and the Eval Partners is the network for evaluation to advance the SDGs, and the Global Evaluation Agenda 2.0. The Eval Partners and IOCE, the first dimension of it is the enabling environments. And the enabling environments for evaluative thinking. Michael Quinn-Patton wrote the foreword for the second edition of the Global Evaluation Agenda. And in it, he wrote that the Global Evaluation Agenda 2.0 recognizes and affirms that participatory processes and engaging evaluation processes have an impact as evaluation is being done, not just through the production of findings and reports, but by infusing evaluative thinking and timely feedback throughout an initiative. And I would say also in the design of initiative. And to the point that was brought in the chat about how the participatory nature and the responsive nature of interventions needs to start with the design. And so I have seen in Canada a national set of best practices that actually start with assessing an intervention by virtue of whose idea was it that this intervention was needed? To what extent is community culture integrated into this intervention? And similarly with evaluation, with my practice for the last, let's say 10 years, because I work with Indigenous Services Canada, when I was invited to participate or advise in a process, my first question is who wants this and who's the intended audience? And again, getting back to the idea of we. So if the we who wants to use it is the we who's asking for it, then it is incumbent for for evaluation systems not only to resource the usual commissioners who are inviting people to the table in a participatory and inclusion way, but also to support self-determination by investing in evaluative processes for the design, the implementation, and the post hoc evaluation of self-determining groups who have been disinvested in as a colonial legacy. And this week, I had the honor of also participating in a panel on Afrocentric evaluation. And similarly, peoples of African descent are coming forward and saying, we are a self-determining people and peoples around the world with much, much distinction, also with a common legacy, colonial legacy, to be overcome together. And so the vision of not only lived experience being included, but actually being honored and supported as self-determination, so that freedom and justice, in the words of Monique Liston, they are interconnected, but they also need to both be focused on. And so the inclusion and self-determination dimensions of the enabling environment are really important to bring into the improvement of evaluation practice and the enabling environment by and as peoples with lived experience in context. Thank you.
So I think a different point, an important point that you brought through, which I think is a real challenge for the evaluation profession, is that if evaluative thinking needs to be part of the whole organizational cycle right from the beginning. And we, all too often, we as evaluators have tended to see ourselves as a special group with this, doing this thing at one time and thinking in a much more diverse way of how we influence management. Baraka, over to you. How, beyond learning and donor compliance, how can we leverage evaluation as a catalyst for concrete social justice outcomes and accountability to the communities we serve?
Yeah, thank you, Prof. I would like to appreciate the contribution that my colleagues have made. And for this question, for me first, it has to do with what success looks like to the community. That means it's the people who should be responsible to define their success. For instance, for us, young people, instead of saying youth empowerment is like income gained, we might have our own way we'd want to define the youth empowerment in that context. So instead of posing as definition with the key performance indicators that Lily brought in for us to following, let people define. And this is what has been made with us, especially under AFREA. We have made in African evaluation, where we are promoting the local communities to define the success from their own. The second, we have also to move the beyond donor compliance, that we should treat monitoring, we should take evaluation not like some external tools which has been exposed by external, but instead it has to be taken as important tool that can help to emancipate and liberate people. So how are we now going to do that? It's about not making them like the data source, but making them feel that whatever is being implemented, really, it means to help what is happening within their context. This would really make sense instead of like coming out with our own definition and posing to them and feeling that they are there to do what, to implement on. Another is about I think evidence must influence decision. This is also a very critical, and sometimes it's not all that the evidence being produced by evaluation is not useful. The issue is whether they are also being used to influence decision. So this is also important, because at the end of the day are those which can help to influence program, to redesign our programs, and even service delivery in the community that we are serving. So evaluation, it has to be transformative, and when it is really shaped by what the decision coming from the people themselves. Another point that I want to make here is about the issue of accountability. It has to flow back to the community. Most of the accountability focuses on upwards, like because we have the donor who has given us money, so we have to collect this information, prepare a report, and send to them. But nothing is being understood by the community really that we are serving. So this is also very important to see that we must have the upward and downward accountability by saying that this is what we have implemented and want to bring back to you, and judge us whether what we have implemented, it really makes sense to you as the people in this society that we are serving. This is very important as well. But also for me, I think also, given the African context, for instance, youth are men in terms of percentage. We are over 60%, yeah, in our population. So youth must shape evaluation system as well. For instance, I know under Evo for Action we have the global evaluation standards that are really championing and advocating the involvement of youth, not as data collectors, but they have to be engaged in terms of the way we design our evaluation, the way we write report, the way we engage different stakeholders and decision makers. It is important. This will bring innovation, and also will bring new energy for the African future evaluation that we would wish to have, because this is a large number of the population that will be now evolving in this area. So all in all, what I would say is that evaluation advances just when evidence leads to visible change in people's life and not otherwise. Thank you.
Thank you, Baraka. Great. Okay, so I'll pick up some of those points later. So Rania, for you, what methodological, ethical, and institutional shifts are required for evaluation to move from measuring change to actively contributing to transformative, justice-centered social change?
Systemic. Thank you. So I was also following the Q&A a little bit, and I think there are two members of audience, Ramanesh and Shivalika, who have asked some questions that maybe my intervention would contribute to answering. So evaluation is a game of power. Okay. we have to be aware of this. If you enter evaluation with a mindset of ticking the box, doing technocratic work, doing data collection, writing reports that would be collecting a lot of dusts from shelves, then this is not what an evaluator really do. And I understand the tension, and I said already that there is a supply and demand. So there is always tension in evaluation. And if we evaluators do not understand this tension and the trade-offs, then we are not aware of our role. So it is a space of power, push and pull, back and forth, a negotiation, a discussion, even in the TOR. And the inception phase is one of the major important. And I feel so disheartened when I see people do not really put all their hearts in the inception phase and they just use the questions that have been in the TOR. It is the place where we can influence that power dynamic. It might not be all the time successful. So I'm not promising you roses here. I'm telling you this is a tough negotiation. But for us evaluators, we need to bring this to the table. And this is why we should include what we are including, or this is why actually we are here to include social justice dimension and environmental justice dimension into the discussion. So just linking this to the methodological part, the process is important, but also the tools and the methods are important, and the values are. So we need to, and Lisa already said, even Gita said, who is going to use this evaluation? This is for whom? So we need to understand this is for whom, because this is for whom decides what are the key elements. And I will tell you, it's a tough decision. Sometimes evaluators say, I don't want to be engaged in this evaluation. And I have done it several times because it's like, oh, we have these questions, we don't want answers. I'm like, I'm not a five grader student taking a test. So thank you, I'm not interested. So evaluators need to reflect upon the nature of evidence they will collect, to think beyond what is dominant in terms of paradigms. So understanding more power dynamics, system thinking, as Gita was saying, distribution and access to resources, knowledge systems itself, the narratives, the language we use, the words, the terminology we're using. As I said, beneficiaries, marginalized. These people, we strip people of agency when we tell them that they are marginalized and they are stakeholders and they are beneficiaries. Like beneficiaries of what? They live in this land. This is their land. This is their power. These are their resources. We're not here to give them the resource. We are actually stripping them out of the resource. So that's an important thinking and lens that we need to include. The other lens is like how we are going to collect this data, meaning in a academic jargon we call it the epistemological aspect of gaining the knowledge. So recognizing the influence and the privilege on knowledge production. Who designs the questions? Which paradigms? The donor request what? Focus group discussions. I mean, I work a lot in the Middle East, and I'll tell you, because of the poor democratic practices, focus group discussion is the worst tool you can ever use. Putting 10 people in a same room and asking them to freely tell you what they think? Ha ha ha! Good luck! So this is important to reflect upon. It's important to incorporate indigenous methodologies. I've done data collection during CAT sessions in Yemen 15 or 20 years ago, because that's where the ladies who were working or who were benefiting from gender-based violence programs, this is where they actually share their real stories. It's during CAT session. It's not during one-on-one interview with me behind me wearing a jacket. I was wearing a abaya because that's the culture and I should do it. So this is very important. Indigenous methodologies, prioritizing relational. aspects: reciprocity, spirituality, community involvement. Emphasizing these oral traditions, storytelling, this is extremely important. It's not just stories. These are real lives narrated in front of us. So data is not only polls. Data is people telling us what they feel, what they think, what they experience. This is data. Also, collaborative partnership with communities. I was very lucky to work with some international organizations as a evaluative consultant to work with them on issues of how we really work collaboratively with communities. Some of them were actually very open to try new methods, participatory research, community-based, people from the community doing the data collection on our behalf. We've done this in several parts of the world, and it was beautiful. But again, not all donors are open to this. And it was like, try me, let's try something new. Push the bar as evaluators. Try. If they say no, it's up to you to take it or leave it. You might need it, so take it. But if they say yes, it's an opportunity. So it's our job to put that on the table for them. So valuing and centering the knowledge on what people think is really important. Cultural sensitivity, various perspective. Also, when we say community engagement, it's not only going and asking the mayor of the village, because the mayor of the village is part of the status quo. We need to ask the women in the village, the boys, the girls who play on the streets. These are who we want to. In some also communities, age is an important issue. Younger people don't talk when older people talk. In parts of the Arab world, in Southeast Asia, parts of Pakistan and India, people don't talk if there is an elderly there or an adult or someone who has more power. So this is important. We need to talk to the youth. We need to talk to the younger children. So these are a bit of what I'm thinking. And then the last little bit is us as evaluators. Again, evaluation is a test of agency for us as well, for our own value system. So let's think objectivity and neutrality isn't objectivity and neutrality. What is objective? Is objective is I don't care about the suffering of other people. I'm a cameraman. Again, then AI can do the job. They don't need me. So questioning the values of the traditional methods, the objectivity, the neutrality, our privileges, our biases, these are extremely important. So every evaluation is really important to understand how, for example, there is misrepresentation of indigenous knowledge, how there is misrepresentation of local cultures, how things are labeled. Again, words have power, so we need to be careful with using these types of words. Thank you.
Thanks, Rania. Okay, so now we move to Geeta. And Geeta's question is, as global crises like climate migration and digital exclusion accelerate, how can evaluators move from retrospective reporting to evaluative foresight to prevent future inequities before they become entrenched? Over to you, Geeta.
Thanks, Ian. I think that's a really thoughtful question. And I'm actually going to build off my fellow panelists on this in responding to this, because a lot of this has been said. So I'm going to try to just bring it together in terms of what the evaluation function has been most criticized for, right? Which is looking backwards. You're not looking in real time. You're not got foresight. And I think what we want to do is moving towards evaluative foresight. So it's shifting from what happened to what might happen next and who could be affected. And I think here I could offer a few practical ways for evaluators to do that, right? Drawing on our experience at the Jeff. So one is, I think, using more future-focused questions. So not just past indicators. So you can test future scenarios. For example, in the climate space, adaptation evaluations, you can start looking at what are the long-term environmental risks, how are population pressures going to affect this? So you could actually ask, help programs to think ahead about how climate stress or migration could affect access to resources, access to services. This is all the panelists have said, bring diverse voices on at a very early stage, at the design stage. So people experiencing, say, displacement or digital exclusion, they often notice emerging problems first, right? So for example, our reviews of biodiversity and protected areas projects show that involving local communities pretty early on, it helps identify possible livelihood or access challenges even before these projects expand. So you can actually help these projects pretty early on through an evaluative process. I think this has been pointed out, but I think here it's a combination. It's not just about systems. You've got to combine data trends with system thinking, because foresight requires you to look at connections, technology, environment, labor, governance. So rather than evaluating projects in isolation, your portfolio level evaluations or thematic evaluations, they link multiple sectors, multiple regions. It helps evaluators spot emerging gaps like uneven technology access or governance pressures before they actually grow. And finally, and I think there were a few questions alluding to this, and Rania also touched on this, is you've got to turn evaluation into a learning loop. And I think this is where organizations don't do as good a job, right? It's not just a final report. So short feedback cycles, real-time data, adaptive recommendations, these allow organizations to actually adjust while programs and projects are still unfolding. So learning-focused approaches, kind of emphasize the need for continuous reflection and helps in course correction instead of just relying on these end-of-project reviews. Now, someone said, who is going to actually use this? Where are these evaluations actually used, right? There was a question. And I just want to shed light from a GEF perspective. We are entering our 9th replenishment process. The fund replenishes every 4 years. Our last replenishment was $5.5 billion spent over 4 years, right? So where does evaluation come into play? And I will tell you, it has been a rewarding experience working at the GEF IEO. It's the independence, it's accountability, but there's also learning. And the reason is the replenishment process of the GEF fund begins with a long discussion on evaluation results. And the donors make sure that the evaluation results actually feed into the next round of programming and policy directions of the GEF. And I'll point out to where we've shifted over time from a complete ex post review, like just looking at things in the hindsight, because projects take a long time, 8 years to implement, a few more years to test sustainability. But everybody wants to know what we funded the last time around. Is it actually working? And this is where we are incorporating more and more real-time evaluation, more and more formative evaluation, so that we can inform projects on the learning side. We keep the accountability angle using ex post, use the ex post to inform the present and the future, but also do some formative and real-time evaluation. So in summary, I want to say that evaluative foresight in climate, environment, be it any field, it's about anticipating risks, it's about listening early, and about adapting continuously so that evaluation actually helps you shape better futures instead of only explaining past outcomes. I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you, Geeta. Okay, so now we want to hear from the participants, the audience in the Zoom room and our audience from the LinkedIn and over the world. So what has struck you so far? What thoughts or questions do you have on our big question today? It's helpful if you ask questions in the Q&A, but otherwise raise your hand if you'd like to speak. And to people joining us on LinkedIn, we're listening to you too. Please make sure to send your comment. We may not be able to see them in the chat. So do we have some question? Okay. So we have a question from the Q&A. What are the methods to increase engagement in the field of evaluation? This is particularly relevant for young emerging evaluators who wish to become more involved in this field without being affiliated with a specialist evaluation association. I mean, Baraka, do you want to sort of respond to that? But please do put your hand up if you'd like to, respond live.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of ways that it can engage, but there's two aspects of this question. First is on the method to increase engagement in the field of evaluation, and the second of the relevant part of the young and emerging evaluators. I think on the aspect of young and emerging evaluators, we have platforms across the continent in respective countries, which goes hand in hand with the country of office, where young and emerging evaluators gets platform to engage and discuss their career pathways and growth in support with the respective VOPs in the respective country. But also there's different ways, including the mentorship that we provide through a structured mentorship. But very recently, under AFREA, we have a new initiative, the African School of Evaluation, which was launched last year in Accra, Ghana. These all are providing space, especially for youth, to engage with the expertise and senior and learn from them about different angles of evaluation. So there's different ways in which you can engage yourself from the country level to the global level. But also look at this. We are here in this webinar. It's a part of learning and engagement as well. So these webinars are always happening every now and then. They are free for everyone to come and engage and learn from other people, as we are doing here. So I do encourage, especially my fellow young and emerging evaluators across the continent and global as well, to make sure that we leverage and utilize these opportunities, because I am the testimony that they have helped a lot in terms of shaping even myself capacities and understanding on how others they do in their space. So Elitra would respond that way. Thank you, Ayat.
Thanks, Baraka. So Ahmed, you've put a comment in the chat. Do you want to voice your comment, Ahmed? You're welcome to voice the comment you made. Ahmed Farag, are you there? Yeah, Ahmed, you want to come in live? Okay. All right. Well, so Ahmed is saying, I fully agree with Rania, and evaluators' greatest asset is the trust that they build with the people providing the data. Without that trust, the data quickly becomes ticking boxes. People tend to tell you what they think you want to hear, which rather defeats the purpose of evaluation. Does anybody want to comment on that? I mean, I see we've got Paolo. That's great. So Paolo, we'll ask you next, but does anybody want to comment on what Ahmed has raised? Maybe Rania, do you want to respond to it?
Yes. I think basically part of our role, again, is to work on the design element and to develop the questions and the inquiry with the evaluation commissioners. So that's a little bit how we can engage and influence the questions that we are going to answer, also influence the methods that we are going to use. Unless you have more kind of specific question in terms of what you are really looking for in your inquiry.
Thanks,
I'd
Brenda. So
like
we'll
to
see.
add a little to that,
Go on,
if I may. So when we talk about going into community as opposed to being invited in, or when we talk about building trust, we're assuming that we, the evaluators or the folks leading the project, are not of the community or from the community. And some of these preoccupations or some of these challenges actually shift when the initiation of the inquiry or the ongoing routine practice is actually something that's part of the organization, including the community. So community-led evaluation can be done with people who have an intergenerational relationship with the community. And it's very much that idea of, to what extent is this a profession, and to what extent is this a way of thinking and a way of interacting and participating as a citizen? And it's both. And so a lot of getting back to the youth engagement, a lot of the opportunities that I would encourage employers and commissioners to consider is supporting developmental positions and supporting people who are not in evaluation positions per se to have protected time to participate in even volunteer activities, and participate in their local VOP or in other types of evaluation work as a action-based learning. It's very low financial cost for the employer. And in terms of the mentoring and the experience for that emerging person, whether they wish to specialize in evaluation as a profession or whether they just want to integrate it into their practice wherever they land in the organization. And I wanted to add those other ways of sort of more organically building evaluation capacity development and practice into the opportunities that are available for young and emerging evaluators.
Okay, so Geeta actually has to leave, and I'm just going to see if she's got a minute to just give a closing reflection herself. And Andrea-Lisa, I'd like to ask you when I invite you to do it, to also just say something about how some of the evaluations are happening with the Indigenous communities that you're working with. So give a very concrete picture of some of those evaluative processes. Geeta, over to you.
Thanks, everyone. No, I think this, for the youth, I would suggest that sessions like this are an opportunity for all of us to learn, right? I've learned a lot from my fellow panelists, from the youth representative here, and I will keep this in mind going away. But I think just being inclusive and participatory, and I think that's half the battle to getting an evaluation well done. So thanks a lot. Thank you. And I'm sorry, I have a meeting I have to attend. Thank you very much.
Hi, Geeta. Okay, so I just want to hand over to Paolo. Paolo, would you like to voice your comment, your question?
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Excellent. I'm Paolo Silveri from the Office of Evaluation of IFAD in Rome, and I've had the privilege of being in evaluation for a long time before moving to operations, and now I'm back to evaluation. So I have seen over time the difference or the jump that the evaluation function has made, at least within the International Fund for Agricultural Development where I work, in the 20 years I've spent in evaluation, in operations, between these two periods in IOE. And I've left an office of evaluation about 20 years ago that was engaged in asserting its independence from operations and from management and from decision makers in a way. So it was trying to determine and affirm its independence of judgment. And when I came back 20 years later, I found that battle was water under the bridge. Nobody questions evaluation independence at IFAD anymore. And this has enabled the evaluation function to move from a basically defensive attitude in keeping distance to underline its independence. It enabled it to move to a much more engaging and much more constructive dynamic in analyzing projects in the field. And I recalled what my first evaluation director said in my early days in this career, that evaluation is more of an art than it is a science. And it is probably an art that uses scientific methods to be implemented, but it is an art in the sense that in order to determine where to draw the line in each specific area and country we work in, where to draw the line between accountability and learning, where to draw the line between distance and proximity, you need to master that art. And what Geeta just said a few minutes ago, I think is impressive, to see how evaluation has moved from looking ex post to what happened years ago and nobody's really interested in anymore, into a situation whereby funds are assigned to an institution based on evaluation debates and deliberation. So the role of evaluation.
Paolo, I'm sorry, I'm going to have to stop you there.
I'm
We're
done.
going to have to move on.
You don't need to stop me. Thank you.
Yeah, so if there's more to say, please put it in the chat. Thanks very much. Okay, so we're moving to the sort of closing phase of this session. So I want to invite each of the panelists to share a key takeaway or a concrete action from our conversation, something our diverse audience can carry with them as we shape how we can help evaluation to make the contribution that's needed for the future. And I'm going to start off with Rania.
Yeah, I would just want to say that contexts change all the time, and we need to be dynamic. Evaluation is a dynamic and not a static exercise. So it's not exposed, as Gita was saying. It's not something that's stiff and set in preset rules. It's a dynamic that needs to understand the context and the changes that we are living in. It needs to adapt as well with what's happening. So that's a little bit the mindset I have around evaluation. Thank you.
Thanks, Rania. And Baraka?
Yeah, thank you, Prof. I think for me, my message is clear and simple that communities should not only provide data, but influence decision. And evaluation evidence must guide the funding and the policy choices. And that development should reach those left behind. Communities must see change from evaluation, not just surveys. These are very critical. Thank you.
Great. Okay, Andrea-Lisa, and maybe you can just very briefly to touch on the question I asked you.
Yeah, so I think the best way for me to address that question is as a settler Canadian working for the colonial government, the most impactful way that I can say that I've participated is to work with the commissioner, with the federal government to say, to what extent is the exercise that's being requested an audit, accountability, follow the money function that where there's very little flexibility, and to what extent is actually a learning exercise, and establish where are the what is the box in which we can truly be responsive and community led, and then within that there has to be if we're inviting participation, there has to be the support to say no. There has to be a meaningful consent process or a meaningful co-creation process. And so for the community to say how much and how little time, information, effort to put in, what they actually want to happen and what they don't want to happen. And that has to be an important part of the shift in the power dynamic. When you are engaging in relationship and learning each other's worldviews, learning the limitations of the systems and the worldviews and the assumptions that you as the evaluator or as the commissioner are working with, that in of itself is mental model changing. It is transformative, and it can have an impact regardless of any product that is produced from the evaluation.
Great. And is that your closing comment? Is there something else you want to add, or was that was it? Okay, great. Okay, So we've heard some powerful calls there, and some of the messages. I think for example, who will use the evaluation? Andrea, really liked your point. Whose idea was it for this initiative? I mean, that's a very fundamental question. Did it come from central government? Did it come from the people who are the users or those affected by those issues? There's a consistent message coming on voice and power of users and those affected, and the need to prioritize relational aspects. And I loved Rania, the picture of the card sessions. I thought that was a great picture. Um, I think there's a lot of work needed about community-based MEL. We have in the academy some Ritu Nanda, who's very committed to this work, and I think that's a whole area that we need to explore, linked to what Andrelise has been saying. And I think this message about we're always talking about upward accountability. Accountability is fine. What about downward accountability? What about downward accountability for resources, for programs, for et cetera, et cetera? I think we need to stress the need for downward accountability, not upward accountability. And Ray Balake, your point about evidence must influence decisions. Unfortunately, we're moving into a post-truth world. And one of the, I love Hannah Arendt's expression that the great success of authoritarian governments is when people start to lose a picture of what truth is. And I think we're in that stage now. And it's our job as evaluators to say, we are going to try and tell the truth. And that is not neutral. It is a deep truth that looks at the deep systems that are working and the systemic issues. Rania, I loved your point about the inception phase. And I think this is a really important point for all of us as evaluators. Take the power. In the inception phase, we have a chance to really question the questions and to really question the tools and methods that are being proposed. Let's use that power. And of course, I think from Geeta, she talked about the point about anticipating risks, listening early and adapting, and the point that Andrelisa raised about that we need to use evaluative thinking throughout the organizational cycle. And I've just been doing some writing on that. Actually, I think it's a very, very important point. So, if I were to sort of come towards a call for action today. For me, social justice is not a nice to have. We're heading for planetary and social destruction. There are many, when you start to look at the pictures of we're heading for well over 2 degrees centigrade. That is heading for climate tipping points. We have massive destruction happening of the natural environment on which we depend. For us to survive and thrive, we have to listen to the needs of other species that provide the home within which we live and other people who have equal rights to abundance. And that means global south, it means indigenous peoples, it means women, it means people who are disadvantaged by current systems. And I love a saying, I can't remember who said it, but you can judge a civilization by the lives of the poorest. So what we have in many countries that call themselves civilized is actually barbarism. So thank you for your playing your part in creating that future. As people working in the evaluation space, we have both an opportunity and a responsibility to try and bring those values and try and bring about the change that we need to happen. So we start to move towards closing. And as we close, I want to thank the different speakers, to the partners, to everyone who's been part of this rich conversation today. The replay will immediately be available on the UNFPA Independent Evaluation Officers link page. This was the 7th in the Future of Evaluation Dialogues, and we very much hope you'll continue this journey with us when we gather again for the 8th dialogue next month. You'll find the registration link in the chat, and I see it's just gone up. Thank you, Bikem, and on evalforaction.org. And as you return to your own work and communities, I invite you to carry with you the spirit of what we've shared here. A commitment to relationship across generations with other species, to values, which are regenerative, to the thoughtful use of new tools and our power as evaluators, and to keeping evaluation grounded in care, equity, and public purpose. So once you leave this webinar, you will see a pop-up very short 2-question survey. Your reflections really matter to us and they help shape these dialogues going forward. So we would be very grateful if you could take a minute to complete it. So until we meet again, thank you and take good care and best wishes.